The dragons shouted for them to stay down, or they would destroy them on the rocks. But the small spirit voice of Lohio called for Hiaka to come and get him. Hiaka chanted to Lohio, telling him they would save him. As they went up, stones in showers fell around and upon them. One large stone struck Hiaka in the breast, and she fell off the pali. Then they began to get up, and sticks of all kinds fell upon them again, forcing Hiaka over the precipice. The dragons leaped down on Hiaka, trying to catch her in their mouths and strike her with their tails. Hiaka struck them with her magic skirt, and their bodies were broken. The spirits of the dragons went into other bodies and leaped upon Hiaka, roaring and biting and tearing her body. She swung her skirt up against the dragons and burned their bodies to ashes. The dragons again took new bodies for the last and most bitter battle. Hiaka told Wahine Omao to cover her body with leaves and sticks near the pali, and in event of her death to return with the tidings to Hawaii. One dragon caught Hiaka and bent her over. The other leaped upon Hiaka, catching her around the neck and arm. One tried to pull off the pa'u and tear it to pieces. Pau'opalae saw the danger. From her home on the island Hawaii, she saw the dragon shaking Hiaka. Then she sent her power and took many kinds of trees and struck the dragons. The roots twisted around the dragons, entangling their feet and tails and scratching eyes and faces. The dragons tried to shake off the branches and roots, the leaf bodies of the wilderness, and one let go the pa'u of Hiaka, and the other let go the neck. Pau'opalae called all the wind bodies of the forest and sent them to aid Hiaka, the forces of the forest, and the wind spirits. At last Hiaka turned to say farewell to Wahine Omao, because the next fight with the dragons in their new bodies might prove fatal. The dragons were now stronger than before. They leaped upon her, one on each side. The strong winds blew and the storm poured upon her, while the dragons struck her to beat her down. But all kinds of ferns were leaping up rapidly around the place where the dragons renewed the fight. The ferns twisted and twined around the legs and bodies of the dragons. Hiaka shook her magic skirt and struck them again and again, and the bodies of these dragons were broken in pieces. Then the wind ceased, the storm passed away, and the sky became clear. But it was almost evening, and darkness was falling fast. The natives have for many years claimed that Hiaka found the time too short to climb the precipice, catch the ghost of Lohio and carry it, and the body down to the house prepared for her work. Therefore she uttered this incantation: "O gods, come to Kauai your land, O pearl-eyed warrior and idol of Halawa, O Kona, guardian of our flesh, O the great gods of Hiaka. Come, ascend, descend, let the sun stop over the river of hay. Stand thou still, O sun." The sun waited, and its light rested on the precipice and pierced the deep shadows of the cave in which the body lay, while Hiaka sought Lohiau. Hiaka heard the spirit voice saying, "Moving, moving, you will find me in a small coconut calabash fastened in tight." Hiaka followed the spirit voice and soon saw a coconut closed up with feathers. Over the coconut a little rainbow was resting. She caught the coconut and went back to the body of Lohiau. It had become very dark in the cave, but she did not care. This was as nothing to her. She took the bundle of the body of Lohiau and said, "We have the body and the spirit. We are ready now to go down to our house." Then she called the spirits of the many kinds of ferns of Pau'opalae to take the body down. The fern servants of Pau'opalae carried the bundle of the body down to the house. Hiaka said to her friend, "You ask how the spirit can be restored into the body. It is hard and mysterious and a work of the gods. We must gather all kinds of ferns and mail and lehua and flowers from the mountains. We must take welua, flowing water, and welani, rain, and put them into new calabashes to use in washing the body. Then pray. If my prayer is not broken, interrupted, or a mistake made, he will be alive. If the prayer is broken 4 times, life will not return. The servants of Pauopalai, the goddess of ferns, brought all manner of sweet-scented ferns, flowers, and leaves to make a bed for the body of Lohio, and to place around the inside of the house as fragrant paths by which the gods could come to aid the restoration to life. There were many prayers, sometimes to one class of gods and sometimes to another. The following prayer was offered to the Omakwas, or ghost gods, residing in cloudland and revealing themselves in different cloud forms. Dark is the prayer rising up to Kanaloa, rising up to the ancient home Kealohilani. Look at the kupwas above sunset. Who are the kupwas above? The black dog of the heavens, the yellow dog of Ku in the small cloud. Ku is in the long cloud, Ku is in the short cloud, Ku is in the cloud of red spots in the sky. Listen to the people of the mountains, the friends of the forest, the voices of the heavens. The water of life runs, life is coming, open with trembling to let the spirit in, a noise rumbling, the sound of Ku. The lover sent for is coming, I, Hiaka, am coming. The lover of my sister Pele, the sister of life, is coming to life again. Live, live. After each one of the prayers and incantations, the body was washed in the kind of water needed for each special ceremony. Thus days passed by, some legends say 10 days, some say a full month. At last the body was ready for the incoming of the spirit. The coconut shell in which the spirit had been kept was held against the body, the feet and limbs were slapped, and the body rubbed by Wahine Omau, while Hiaka continued her necessary incantations until the restoration to life was complete. Many, many days had passed since the fiery and impetuous Pele had sent her youngest sister after the lover Lohiau. In her restlessness, Pele had torn up the land in all directions around the pit of fire with violent earthquakes. She had poured her wrath in burning floods of lava over all the southern part of the island. She had broken her most solemn promise to Hiaka. Whenever she became impatient at the delay of the coming of Lohio, she would fling her scorching smoke and foul gas over Hiaka's beautiful forests, and sometimes would smite the land with an overflow of burning lava. Sometimes she would look down over that part of Puna where Hopo dwelt and hurl spurts of lava toward her home. At last she had yielded to her jealous rage and destroyed Hopo and her home, and then burned the loved spots of restful beauty belonging to Hiaka. Hiaka had seen Pele's action as she had looked back from time to time on her journey to Kauai. Even while she was bringing Lohau back to life, her love for her own home revealed to her the fires kindled by Pele, and she chanted many songs of complaint against her unfaithful sister. Hiaka loyally fulfilled her oath until she stood with Lohio on one of the high banks overlooking Kalua Pele, the pit of Pele in the volcano Kilauea. Down below in the awful majesty of fire were the sisters. Wahine Omau went down to them as a messenger from Hiaka. One of the legends says that Pele killed her. Another says that she was repulsed and driven away. Others say that Pele refused to listen to any report of the journey to Kauai and hurled Wahine Omau senseless into a hole near the fire pit and raved against Hiaka for the long time required in bringing Lohiau. Hiaka at last broke out in fierce rebellion against Pele. On the hill where they stood were some of the lehua trees with their brilliant red blossoms. She plucked the flowers, made wreaths, and going close to Lohiau hung them around his neck. All through the long journey to the crater, Lohiau had been gaining a full appreciation of the bravery, the unselfishness, and the wholly lovable character of Hiaka. He had proposed frequently that they be husband and wife. Now, as they stood on the brink of the crater with all the proof of Pele's oath breaking around them, Hiaka gave way entirely. She chanted while she fastened the flowers tightly around him, and while her arms were playing around his neck. Hiaka is the wife, caught in the embrace with the flowers. The slender thread is fast. Around him the leis from the land of the Lehuas are fastened. I am the wife. The clouds are blown down, hiding the sea at Hilo." Lohio had no longer any remnant of affection for Pele. Hiaka had fulfilled her vow, and Pele had broken all her promises. Lohio and Hiaka were now husband and wife. Pele had lost forever her husband of the long sleep. Pele was uncontrollable in her jealous rage. One of the legends says that even while Lohio and Hiaka were embracing each other, Pele ran up the hill and threw her arms around his feet, and black lava congealed over them. Then she caught his knees and then his body. Lava followed every clasp of the arms of Pele, until at last his whole body was engulfed in a lava flow. His spirit leaped from the body into some clumps of trees and ferns not far away. Another legend says that Pele sent her brother Lono Makua with his helpers to kindle eruptions around Lohio and Hiaka. This could not harm Hiaka, for she was at home in the worst violence of volcanic flames, but it meant death to Lohio. Lono Makua kindled fires all around Lohio, but for a long time refrained from attacking him. Hiaka could not see the pit as clearly as Lohio, so she asked if Pele's fires were coming. He chanted, "Hot is this mountain of the priest. Rain is weeping on the awa. I look over the rim of the crater. Roughly tossing is the lava below, coming up to the forest, attacking the trees, clouds of smoke from the crater." The lava came up, surrounding them. Tossing fountains of lava bespattered them. Wherever any spot of his body was touched, Lohio became stone. He uttered incantations and used all his powers as a sorcerer chief. The lava found it difficult to overwhelm him. Pele sent increased floods of burning rock upon him. Lohio's body was all turned to stone. His spirit fled from the pit to the cool places of a forest on a higher part of the surrounding mountains. Hiaka was crazed by the death of Lohio. She had fought against the eruption. Now she caught the lava, tore it to pieces, and broke down the walls toward the innermost depths of their lava home. She began to open the pit for the coming of the sea. Pele and her sisters were frightened. Pele called Wahine Omao from her prison and listened to the story of Hiaka's faithfulness. Chagrined and full of self-blame, she told Wahine Omao how to restore happiness to her friend. Wahine Omao went to Hiaka and softly chanted by the side of the crazy one who was breaking up the pit. She told the story of the journey after Lohio and the possibility of seeking the wandering ghost. Hiaka turned from the pit and sought Lohio. Many were the adventures in Ghostland. At last the ghost was found. Lohio's body was freed from the crust of lava and healed, and the ghost put back in its former home. A second time Hiaka had given life to Lohio. Hiaka and Lohio went to Kauai, where, as chief and chiefess, they lived happily until real death came to Lohio. Then Hiaka returned to her place in the Pele family. It was said that Wahine Omao became the wife of Lono Makua, the one kindling volcanic fire. 18. The annihilation of Keiu's army, almost exactly 34 years before Kapiolani defied the worship of the fire goddess Pele. Keiua, a high chief, lost a large part of his army near the volcano Kilauea. This was in November 1790. Lani Opuhu had been king over the island Hawaii. When he died in 1782, he left the kingdom to his son Kiwalau, giving the second place to his nephew Kamehameha. War soon arose between the cousins. Kamehameha defeated and killed the young king. Kiwalau's half-brother Keoa escaped to his district Kau on the southwestern side of the island. His uncle Keawe Mauhili escaped to his district Hilo on the southeastern side. For some years, the three factions practically let each other alone, although there was desultory fighting. Then the high chief of Hilo accepted Kamehameha as his king and sent his sons to aid Kamehameha in conquering the island Maui. Keoa was angry with his uncle Keawe Mauhili. He attacked Hilo, killed his uncle, and ravaged Kamehameha's lands along the northeastern side of the island. Kamehameha quickly returned from Maui and made an immediate attack on his enemy, who had taken possession of a fertile highland plain called Waimea. From this method of forcing unexpected battle came the Hawaiian saying, "The spear seeks Waimea like the wind." Keoua was defeated and driven through forests along the eastern side of Mauna Kea, the White Mountain, to Hilo. Then Kamehameha sent warriors around the western side of the island to attack Keoua's home district. Meanwhile, after a sea fight in which he defeated the chiefs of the islands, Maui and Oahu, he set his people to building a great temple chiefly for his war god Ka'ili. This was the last noted temple built on all the islands. Keoua heard of the attack on his home. Therefore he gave the fish ponds and fertile lands of Hilo to some of his chiefs, and hastened across the island with his army by way of a path near the volcano Kilauea. He divided his warriors into 3 parties, taking charge of the first in person. They passed the crater at a time of great volcanic activity. A native writer, probably Kamakau, in the native newspaper Kuokoa, 1867, describes the destruction of the central part of this army by an awful explosion from Kilauea. He said, "Thus was it done." Sand, ashes, and stones grew up from the pit into a very high column of fire, standing straight up. The mountains of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa were below it. The people, even from Kauaihehe, a seaport on the opposite side of the mountains, saw this wonderful column with fire glowing and blazing to its very top. When this column became great, it blew all to pieces into sand and ashes and great stones, which for some days continued to fall around the sides of Kilauea. Men, women, and children were killed. Mona, one of the army who saw all this but who escaped, said that one of the chiefesses was ill and some hundreds of the army had delayed their journey to guard her, and so escaped this death. Dibble, the first among the missionaries to prepare a history of the islands, gave the following description of the event. Keoua's path led by the great volcano of Kilauea. There they encamped. In the night a terrific eruption took place, throwing out flames, cinders, and even heavy stones to a great distance, and accompanied from above with intense lightning and heavy thunder. In the morning, Keoua and his companions were afraid to proceed, and spent the day in trying to appease the goddess of the volcano, whom they supposed they had offended the day before by rolling stones into the crater. But on the 3rd day they ventured to proceed on their way, but had not advanced far before a more terrible and destructive eruption than any before took place, an account of which, taken from the lips of those who were part of the company and present in the scene, may not be an unwelcome digression. The army of Keoua set out on their way in 3 different companies. The company in advance had not proceeded far before the ground began to shake and rock beneath their feet, and it became quite impossible to stand. Soon a dense cloud of darkness was seen to rise out of the crater, and almost at the same instant the electrical effect upon the air was so great that the thunder began to roar in the heavens and the lightning to flash. It continued to ascend and spread abroad until the whole region was enveloped and the light of day was entirely excluded. The darkness was the more terrific, being made visible by an awful glare from streams of red and blue light variously combined that issued from the pit below, and being lit up at intervals by the intense flashes of lightning from above. Soon followed an immense volume of sand and cinders which were thrown in high heaven and came down in a destructive shower for many miles around. Some few persons of the forward company were burned to death by the sand and cinders, and others were seriously injured. All experienced a suffocating sensation upon the lungs and hastened on with all possible speed. The rear body, which was nearest the volcano at the time of the eruption, seemed to suffer the least injury, and after the earthquake and shower of sand had passed over, hastened forward to escape the dangers which threatened them, and rejoicing in mutual congratulations that they had been preserved in the midst of such imminent peril. But what was their surprise and consternation when, on coming up with their comrades of the center party, they discovered them all to have become corpses. Some were lying down and others sitting upright, clasping with dying grasp, their wives and children enjoining noses, their form of expressing affection, as in the act of taking a final leave. So much like life they looked, that they at first supposed them merely at rest, and it was not until they had come up to them and handled them that they could detect their mistake. Of the whole party, including women and children, not one of them survived to relate the catastrophe that had befallen their comrades. The only living being they found was a solitary hog, in company with one of the families which had been so suddenly bereft of life. In those perilous circumstances, the surviving party did not even stay to bewail their fate, but, leaving their deceased companions as they found them, hurried on and overtook the company in advance at the place of their encampment. Keoa and his followers, of whom the narrator of this scene were a part, retreated in the direction they had come. On their return, they found their deceased friends as they had left them, entire and exhibiting no other marks of decay than a sunken hollowness in their eyes. The rest of their bodies was in a state of entire preservation. They were never buried, and their bones lay bleaching in the sun and rain for many years. A blast of sulphurous gas, a shower of heated embers, or a volume of heated steam would sufficiently account for this sudden death. Some of the narrators who saw the corpses affirm that, though in no place deeply burnt, yet they were thoroughly scorched. Keoa's prophets ascribed this blow from the gods to their high chief's dislike of Hilo and gift to sub-chiefs of the fish ponds, which were considered the favored food producers for offerings to Hiaka, the youngest member of the Pele family. Kamehameha's prophets said that this eruption was the favor of the gods on his temple building. The people said it was proof that Pele had taken Kamehameha under her especial protection and would always watch over his interests and make him the chief ruler. 19 Destruction of Kamehameha's fish ponds, Mount Hualalai, is on the western side of the island, Hawaii. It has been announced as an extinct volcano because few signs of volcanic life appear at present. But in the year 1801 there was a very violent eruption from the foot of the mountain, and the expectation of future action is so strong that scientists classify Hualalai as active. Ellis, writing in 1824, says, "This eruption of 1801 poured over several villages, destroyed a number of plantations and extensive fish ponds, filled up a deep bay 20 miles in length, and formed the present coast. An Englishman who saw the eruption has frequently told us that he was astonished at the irresistible impetuosity of the torrent. Stone walls, trees, and houses all gave way before it. Even large masses or rocks of ancient lava, when surrounded by the fiery stream, soon split into small fragments, and falling into the burning mass appeared to melt again while borne by it down the mountainside. Numerous offerings were presented, and many hogs were thrown alive into the stream to appease the anger of the gods, by whom they supposed it was directed, and to stay its devastating course. All seemed unavailing until one day King Kamehameha went to the flowing lava, attended by a large retinue of chiefs and priests, and, as the most valuable offering he could make, cut off part of his own hair, which was always considered sacred, and threw it into the torrent. In a day or two the lava ceased to flow. The gods, it was thought, were satisfied. The people attributed this escape to the influence of Kamehameha with the deities of the volcanoes. There are several very interesting blowholes in this lava. When the lava struck the waves, the surface and sides were hardened, but the red molten mass inside rolled on into the sea. Thus many sea caves were formed, into which waves beat violently with every incoming tide. If the shore end of a cave broke open, a fine outlet was made for the torrents which were hurled up through the opening in splendid fountains of spray. The account in the Kuokoa, a newspaper published in the native language in 1867, adds to the story of the foreigner the element of superstition, and is practically as follows. Pele began to eat hué, a noted breadfruit forest owned by Kamehameha. She was jealous of him and angry because he was stingy in his offerings of breadfruit from the taboo grove of Hu. This was the place where the eruption broke out. After she had destroyed the breadfruit grove, she went in her river of fire down to the seashore to take Kamehameha's fish ponds. She greatly desired the awa fish with the mullet in the fish pond at Kiholo, and she wanted the aku or bonita in the fish pond at Ka'aelehulu. She became a roaring flood, widely spread out, hungry for the fish. Kamehameha was very much ashamed for the evil which had come upon the land and the destruction of his fish ponds. Villages had been overwhelmed. Several coconut groves had been destroyed, and lava land was built out into the sea. There were no priests who could stop this eruption by their priestly skill. Their powers were dulled in the presence of Pele. They offered pigs and fruits of all kinds, throwing them into the fire. They uttered all their known incantations and prayers. They called to the Omakwas, ancestor ghost, gods, but without avail. Kamehameha sent for Ka'amaka o Ke'akua, the eye of the god, one of the prophets of Pele, and said, "You are a prophet of Pele. I have sent for you because I am much distressed by the destruction of the land and the ponds by the sea. How can I quiet the anger of Pele?" The prophet bowed his head for a time, then looking up said, "The anger of the god will cease when you offer sacrifice to her." The king said, "Perhaps you will take the sacrifice." The prophet said, "From the old time even until now there has been no prophet or priest of the Mo'o or dragon clan who has done this thing. It would not please the goddess. The high chief of the troubled land with a prophet or priest is the only one who can make peace. He must take his own offering to the fire as to an altar in a temple. Then the anger of the goddess will be satisfied and the trouble ended." Kamehameha said, "I am afraid of Pele. Perhaps I shall be killed." The prophet replied, "You shall not die." The king prepared offerings and sacrifices for Pele and, as a royal priest, went to the place where the lava was still pouring in floods out of its newborn crater. Kahumanu the queen and many other high chiefs and chiefesses thought they would go and die with him if Pele should persist in punishing him. One of the high chiefesses, Ululani, had lost a child some time before. This child after death was given to Pele with sacrifices and ceremonies which would make it one of the ghost gods connected with the Pele family. A prophet told Kayahumanu, "The Pele who is in the front of this outburst of fire is not strange to us. It is the child of Ululani." Kayahumanu took Ululani with her to the side of the lava flow. There they saw the lava like a river of fire flowing toward the west, going straight down to the sea with leaping flames and uplifting fountains of smoke. There was a very strong flashing light breaking out at the front of the descending lava. Ululani asked, "Who is that very strange fire in front of Pele?" The fire was active as if it had life in itself. The prophet replied, "That is the child among the Aumakuas. That is your firstborn." Then came great winds and a mighty storm. Houses were overturned and trees blown down. Kamehameha and the prophet went up to the side of the lava and placed offerings and sacrifices in the flowing fire. They prayed to Pele, but the fire burned on. Kamehameha then cut some of the hair from his head and threw it in the fire as his last offering, thus giving himself to the god of fire. Then they came away and soon the fire went out. It should be remembered that in recent years, when a lava flow came down on the city of Hilo, threatening its destruction, Princess Ruth, one of the last of the Kamehameha family, went from Honolulu to Hilo and up to the River of Lava with the feeling that a Kamehameha who was under the especial protection of Pele could intercede for the welfare of the people. It is certain that she came at a very opportune time, for the eruptions ceased in a day or so. 20 Kapiolani and P. The story of the High Chiefess Kapiolani and her conflict with Pele, the goddess of Kilauea, in December 1824, is historic. It belongs, however, to the volcanoes of the Hawaiian Islands, and is more important than any myth. Kapiolani was the daughter of Kiawe Mauhili, who was the high chief of the district of Hilo. He was the uncle of Kiwalau, the young king of the island Hawaii, who was killed by Kamehameha's warriors when Kamehameha became king of that island. Kapiolani as a little child was in the camp with her father at the time of the battle. She was in danger of death, but some men carried her over the mountains through a multitude of difficulties back to Hilo. She became a tall, portly woman with keen black eyes and an engaging countenance, a queen in appearance when with other chiefs or chiefesses. She was not a queen, nor was she even a princess, although by blood relationship she belonged to the royal family. She was the wife of Na'aihe, who was the high chief of the district of Kona on the western side of the island Hawaii. Na'aihe, the Spears, was said to be the national orator or best speaker on government affairs among the chiefs. Kapiolani, the bending arch of heaven, was very intelligent, quick-witted, and fearless. They were both so influential that they were chosen by the great Kamehameha as members of his council of chiefs and were retained by his son Liholiho, or Kamehameha II. When the missionaries of the American Board from Boston arrived, April 4, 1820, at Kailua Bay on the western coast of Hawaii, they landed in territory nominally controlled by Na'aihe and Kapiolani, although at that particular time the young king, Liholiho, and his court were in Kona and were the real rulers. However, when the missionaries had reduced the language to writing and had begun to print leaflets for spelling and reading, in 1822 Na'aihe and Kapiolani were among the first chiefs to welcome instruction and accept Christianity as far as they could understand it. In 1823, a delegation of missionaries went around the island Hawaii. They visited the volcano Kilauea and wrote the first really good description of the crater and its activity. The natives were astonished to see the perfect safety of the missionaries, although the worship and tabus of Pele were absolutely ignored. Ohelo berries and strawberries growing on the brink of the crater were freely eaten, and the lake of fire explored without even a thought of fear of the goddess. In the course of their journey, the missionaries met a priestess of Pele. The priestess, assuming a haughty air, said, "I am Pele, I shall never die. Those who follow me, if part of their bones are taken to Kilauea, will live in the bright fire there." A missionary said, "Are you Pele?" She said, "Yes, I am Pele," then proceeded to state her powers. A chief of low rank who had been a royal messenger under Kamehameha and who was making the journey with the missionaries interrupted the woman, saying, "Then it is true you are Pele and have destroyed the land, killed the people, and have spoiled the fishing grounds. If I were the king, I would throw you into the sea." The priestess was quick-witted and said that truly she had done some harm, but the rum of the foreigners was far more destructive. All this prepared the way for Kapiolani to attempt to break down the worship of the fire goddess. It must be remembered that Kapiolani had been under the influence of thoughtful civilization only about 3 years when she decided that she would attack the idolatry which, of all idol worship, was the most firmly entrenched in the hearts of her people, because it was founded on the mysterious forces of nature. She accepted implicitly the word of the missionaries that their God was the one God of nature. Therefore, she had rejected the fire goddess with all the other deities formerly worshipped in Hawaii. She was, however, practically alone in her determination to strike a blow against the worship of Pele. priests of Pele were numerous on the island Hawaii. Women were among those of highest rank in that priesthood. Many of the personal followers of Kapiolani were worshippers. Even Na'aihe, her husband, had not been able to free himself from superstitious fears. When Kapiolani said that she was going to prove the falsity of the worship of Pele, there was a storm of heartfelt opposition. The priests and worshippers of Pele honestly believed that divine punishment would fall on her. Those who were Christians were afraid that some awful explosion might overwhelm the company, as a large body of warriors had been destroyed 34 years before. Na'aihe, still strongly under the influence of superstition, urged her not to go. All this opposition arose from her warm friends. When her determination was seen to be immovable, some of the priests of Pele became bitterly angry and in their rage prophesied most awful results. When Kapiolani left her home in Kona, her people, with great wailing, again attempted to persuade her to stay with them. The grief, stimulated by fear of things supernatural, was uncontrollable. The people followed their chiefess some distance with prayers and tears. For more than 100 miles she journeyed, usually walking, sometimes having a smooth path, but again having to cross miles of the roughest, most rugged and sharp-edged lava on the island Hawaii. At last the party came to the vicinity of the volcano. This was not by the present road, but along the smoother, better way, used for centuries on the south side of the crater toward the ocean. Toward the close of the day they crossed steaming cracks and chasms and drew nearer to the foul-smelling gaseous clouds of smoke which blew toward them from the great crater. Here a priestess of Pele of the highest rank came to meet the party and turn them away from the dominions of the fire goddess unless they would offer appropriate sacrifices. She knew Kapiolani's purpose and determined to frustrate it. Formerly there had been a temple near the brink of the crater on the southeast side. This, according to Ellis, bore the name O'Alalaua. He says it was a temple of Pele, of which Ka Maka'a Ke Akua, the Eye of God, a distinguished soothsayer who died in the reign of Kamehameha, was many years priest. The temple was apparently deserted at the time of the overthrow of the taboo in 1819, and the priests had gone to the lower and better cultivated lands of Puna, where they had their headquarters. However, they still worshipped Pele and sacrificed to her. This priestess who faced Kapiolani was very haughty and bold. She forbade her to approach any nearer to the volcano on pain of death at the hands of the furious goddess Pele. "Who are you?" asked Kapiolani. "I am one in whom the God dwells. If God dwells in you, then you are wise and can teach me." "Come and sit down." The priestess had seen printed pages or heard about them, so she drew out a piece of kapa, or paper made from the bark of trees, and saying that this was a letter from Pele, began to read, or rather mumble, an awful curse. The people with Kapiolani were hushed into a terrified silence, but she listened quietly until the priestess, carried beyond her depth, read a confused mass of jumbled words and unintelligible noises which she called the dialect of the ancient Pele. Then Kapiolani took her spelling book and a little book of a few. "Your God, but we have not understood it. Now I will read you a message which you can understand, for I too have a letter." Then she read clearly the biblical sentences printed in the spelling book and some of the hymns. The priestess was silenced. Meanwhile, the missionaries at Hilo, 150 miles from Kona, heard that Kapiolani had started on this strenuous undertaking. They felt that some one of the Christian teachers should be with her. Mr. Ruggles had been without shoes for several months and could not go. Mr. Goodrich, the other missionary stationed at Hilo, was almost as badly off, but was more accustomed to traveling barefoot. So he went up through the tangled masses of sharp-edged lava, grass, strong-leaved ferns, and thick woods to meet the chiefess as she came to the crater. Kapiolani passed the priestess, went on to the crater, met Mr. Goodrich, and was much affected by the effort he had made to aid her in her attempt to break down the worship of Pele. It was now evening, and a hut was built to shelter her until the next day came, when she could have the opportunity of descending into the crater. Mr. Richards, a missionary, later wrote as follows: "Along the way to the volcano she was accosted by multitudes and entreated not to proceed. She answered, 'If I am destroyed, then you may all believe in Pele, but if I am not, you must all turn to the true writings.' The great crater at that time had a black ledge or shelf, below which the active lakes and fountains of fire in many places broke through and kept turbulent a continually changing mass over 5 miles in circumference. Here, in the large cones built up by leaping lava, the natives said, were the homes of the family of Pele. Here the deities amused themselves in games. The roaring of the furnaces and crackling of flames was the music of drums beaten for the accompaniment of the household dances. The red flaming surge was the surf wherein they played. As the morning light brought a wonderful view of the Lua Pele, the pit of Pele, with its great masses of steam and smoke rising from the immense field of volcanic activity below, and as the rush of mighty waves of lava broke again and again against the black ledge with a roar exceeding that of a storm-driven surf beating upon rocky shores, and as fierce explosions of gases bursting from the underworld in a continual cannonade deafened the ears of the company, Kapiolani prepared to go down to defy Pele. This must have been one of the few grand scenes of history. There was the strong, brave convert to Christianity standing above the open lake of fire, the red glowing lava rolling in waves below, with rough blocks of hardened lava on every side, the locks, Pele's hair of the fire goddess, torn out and whirling around in the air, the timid, fearful faces of the people and their attitude of terror and anxiety showing the half-hope that the taboo might be broken and the half-dread lest the evil spirit might breathe fire upon them and destroy them at once. Mr. Richards says, "A man whose duty it was to feed Pele by throwing berries and the like into the volcano entreated her to go no farther. 'And what,' said she, 'will be the harm?' The man replied, 'You will die by Pele.' Kapiolani answered, 'I shall not die by your god.' That fire was kindled by my god. The man was silent, and she went onward, descending several hundred feet, and there joined in a prayer to Jehovah. She also ate the berries consecrated to Pele, and threw stones into the volcano. Bingham, in his Sandwich Islands, says, "Then with the terrific bellowing and whizzing of the volcanic gases they mingled their voices in a solemn hymn of praise to the true God, and at the instance of the chiefess Alapai, one of Kapiolani's attendants, led them in prayer." The party returned to the brink of the crater and journeyed down to Hilo. Alexander, in the History of the Hawaiian People, says, "This has justly been called one of the greatest acts of moral courage ever performed." Richard states that the leader of Kapiolani's party said to him, "All the people of the district saw that she was not injured and have pronounced Pele to be powerless." The influence of Kapiolani against this most influential form of idolatrous worship was felt throughout the whole nation. In 1836, 12 years later, Reverend Titus Cohen wrote about the coming of many natives into a Christian life. He says, "In 1836, 12 years after the visit of Kapiolani, among these converts was the high priest of the volcano. He was more than 6 feet tall, and was of lofty bearing. He had been an idolater, a drunkard, an adulterer, a robber, and a murderer. His sister was more haughty and stubborn. She, too, was tall and majestic in her bearing. At length she yielded, and with her brother became a docile member of the church. But it was Lord Tennyson who set down for posterity the heroic deed of the great queen in the following beautiful poem, Kapiolani. I, when from the terrors of nature a people have fashioned and worship a spirit of evil, blessed be the voice of the teacher who calls to them, 'Set yourselves free!' 2. Noble the Saxon who hurled at his idol a valorous weapon in olden England. Great, and greater, and greatest of women, island heroine Kapiolani clomb the mountain, and flung the berries and dared the goddess, and freed the people of Hawaii. 3. A people believing that Pila the goddess would wallow in fiery riot and revel on Kilauea, dance in a fountain of flame with her devils, or shake with her thunders and shatter her island, rolling her anger, throws blasted valley and flowing forest in blood-red cataracts down to the sea. 4. Long as the lava light glares from the lava lake, dazing the starlight, long as the silvery vapor in daylight over the mountain floats, will the glory of Kapiolani be mingled with either on Hawaii. What said her priesthood? Woe to this island if ever a woman should handle or gather the berries of Pele. Accursed were she, and woe to this island if ever a woman should climb to the dwelling of Pele the goddess. Accursed were she. 6. One from the sunrise dawned on his people, and slowly before him vanished shadow-like gods and goddesses, none but the terrible Pila remaining as Kapiolani ascended her mountain, baffled her priesthood, broke the taboo, dipped to the crater, called on the power adored by the Christian, and crying, "I dare her, let Pila avenge herself." Into the flame billows dashed the berries, and drove the demon from Hawa. Part 2. Geological Facts Note. The following articles pertaining to the geological formation of the Hawaiian Islands were written by the author at different times for the various local periodicals in Honolulu, and will be found interesting by those who wish to increase their knowledge of volcanology. The crack in the floor of the Pacific. A geological or earthquake map of the Pacific shows that the ocean is bordered by ranges of volcanic mountains on the American side, and by a long chain of volcanic islands, such as the Aleutian, Japanese, and Formosa Islands along the coast of Asia. It is also clear that between America and Asia, connected islands built up by volcanic action follow what appear to be cracks in the floor of the Pacific. It is interesting to note the fact that all along the western coast of North and South America, there is only a comparatively narrow strip of land between the mountain ranges and the sea, and that from the edge of this narrow seacoast, there is a rapid descent in the ocean bed until it becomes one of the most profound oceanic depressions on the globe. The depth of the floor of the ocean is greater than the enormous elevation of the mountain ranges along its edge. The Challenger. Surveyors give the average depth of the Pacific Ocean as about 2,400 fathoms, while between the Caroline and Ladrone groups of islands lies a valley whose ooze-carpeted floor can be reached only by a sounding line about 25,000 feet long, and near Japan about 30,000 feet of line is needed to reach the bottom of one of the deepest pits on the globe. The German survey ship Planet has made the deepest sounding thus far taken. About 40 sea miles off the north coast of Mindanao, the largest and most southerly of the important islands of the Philippines, the Planet found a depth of 32,078 feet. In other words, the Pacific Ocean where the sounding was taken has a depth of 6.27 miles, exceeding by 482 feet the greatest depth hitherto known. In 1901, the United States survey ship Nero, while studying out a route for a cable line to the Philippines, made a sounding some distance to the southeast of the island of Guam of 31,596 feet, which beat the world's record for sea depth up to that time. This is a depth of 5.98 miles and is known as the Nero Deep. The surpassing sea depth now discovered may appropriately be named the Planet Deep. Out of these awful ocean depths have come the chains and groups of islands which form Polynesia. It seems absolutely necessary to recognize the cracks in the floor of the ocean through which the vast floods of lava were forced for the upbuilding of these islands. Even the coral polyps had to have the edge of a crater to work on while building the innumerable coral reefs of the Pacific. No one knows what mighty conflicts were fought between the two eternal enemies, fire and water. Nor does anyone know how long they fought while these islands were being built into mountains. But there must have been ages when the skies were filled with rolling masses of clouds of steam sent up through boiling, turbulent waters with awful explosions of escaping gases before the dry land appeared on the face of the deep. It has been the modern story of creation. There were boiling seas and skies always covered with vast masses of steam clouds, then ages of mountain building at the hands of chaotic fire rock, and the subsequent ages of the disintegration of lava, forming soil for the coming of plant and animal life. The building of these islands has been a most stupendous task, and the chains of islands resulting from the tremendous volcanic energy still exhibit immense activity. The volcanic outbreaks and earthquakes of the Japanese islands from Nippon to Formosa are so frequent as to afford an excellent field for study. The New Zealand islands have a volcanic region around Rotorua, which is visited by numbers of tourists every year. Islands appear and disappear in the Western Pacific. None of the islands have so good a tradition of these turbulent times as the Hawaiian group, and they have only a statement made by William Ellis in his book, A Tour Through Hawaii, published in 1826. He says that while on this tour around the island Hawaii, he stopped with John Young, who is now stated to have been an American sailor and a close friend of the great King Kamehameha. Mr. Young said that among many traditionary accounts of the origin of the island, one was that in former times, when there was nothing but sea, an immense bird settled on the water and laid an egg which soon bursting produced the island Hawaii. It must be remembered that the Hawaiians also have the pulling up of the islands with a fishhook by the demigod Maui, who fished up many islands in Polynesia. It has been nearly 100 years since Ellis made the brief reference to the production of an island by the explosion of the egg, and now it is impossible to secure any enlargement of the legend. The story stands as an ancient memory of volcanic activity so mighty and so extensive as to produce islands in the time of human experience. To Hawaii volcano s. Each island has its extinct craters from which extend the limited ranges of mountains and plains which make the island's surface. These large craters are from a few hundred to over 13,000 feet in altitude. They seem to have had mighty explosions after they had been built into mountains, and one side of the crater has usually been blown out or has slid down into the ocean, leaving very high, steep side walls around irregularly shaped valleys opening toward the sea. In these craters and between them and the sea are many small craters which mark the most recent eruptions on the various islands. There are no legends of the origin of any of these large craters, whether extinct or active. There are very interesting stories connected with many of them, and there are legends of the origin of some of the small extinct craters which lie at the bases of the mountain ranges. These usually are ascribed to the fire goddess Pele, who came to the Hawaiian group ages after the islands were built, and who only succeeded in starting eruptions of no great importance until she found her present home in the volcano Kilauea. These small extinct craters mark the progress of Pele's journey through the islands. The large mountains of all the islands, except Hawaii, have no hot springs and no outlets for steam or hot air which would indicate any remnant of living fire still abiding in them. Nor are there any very noticeable earthquake shocks in these other islands, even at the time when the island Hawaii is pouring floods of lava down its mountainsides and is shaking its inhabitants with great force. Open volcanic activity is confined to the mountains of Hawaii. The mountains of Maui, especially Haleakala, are called active because of historic eruptions and signs of hidden fire. The extinct craters are very interesting. They have their broken-down side wall, through which the last great effort of volcanic life was poured out. They also have crater cones and sometimes lava flows of small extent on the floor left by the great eruption. These were the picturesque last throbs of life as a volcano died. Occasional spasmodic efforts were made in both earthquake and lava flow until the fire cooled in the submarine chambers. From the summits of all these mountains, peculiarly fine cloud views can be enjoyed. There is not only the gathering of cloud masses rolling beneath the lover of the sublime. This can be seen on all the large mountains of the world. But here in the Hawaiian Islands, the march of cloud armies sweeping over an ocean and spreading in ceaseless motion for miles over the lowlands receives an added element of majesty and awe when tossing. Whirling cloud mountains roll into the extinct craters and slowly fill the bowl of the gods from rim to rim as the morning sun delicately touches the crater edges above the clouds with all the colors of the dawn. Here and there in the decaying volcanic ash and disintegrating lava can sometimes be found beautiful, small, star-rayed zeolite or the pale green olivine or coarse black augite crystals. These are of no value save as they show some of the forms taken by cooling lava and are of interest chiefly to the scientist. On the island Hawaii are three great mountains from 8,200 to 13,600 feet above the ocean, which smashes its mighty tides and surf waves against the coast below. One of these, Mauna Kea, White Mountain, is an extinct volcano with a lake of water in its crater. Hualalai is dormant, although from it there was a great eruption a little over 100 years ago, and even now possibilities of activity are talked about by those who cultivate sugarcane and coffee on its lower slopes. Mauna Loa, Great or Long Mountain, has a most interesting active crater on its summit, Mokuaweweo, Blood Red Island, from which enormous rivers of lava are hurled down to the waiting ocean many miles below. What is said to be the most active crater in the world, Kilauea, lies on an eastern spur of Mauna Loa at an elevation of 4,000 feet above the sea. This crater is a great cauldron or pit crater and has been known among the Hawaiians for centuries as Ka Lua Pele, the Pit of Pele. Below Kilauea are a number of craters of similar character, great sunken holes or pits in a country of almost even surface. Kilauea is a surprise to the tourist. Kilauea means the rising up or living leaf of the tea plant. Ia means to rise up and also to live. Kilau means tea leaf. A gradual ascent by rail and motor car for about 30 miles brings the visitor to a flat region miles in extent and sparsely covered with giant ferns and shrubs and gray-leaved trees with fringed red balls of flowers. Here and there, small clouds of steam come from crevices around a hotel where the traveler finds his resting place. In front of this hotel, and not seen until the motor car stops, is the crater whose edges are almost level with the surrounding plain. It is a precipice-walled bowl, 3 miles across, with a multitude of steam jets breaking through its vast floor and a great cloud of smoke rising from a pit in a black borderland of frozen lava. Kilauea looks like a congealed lake whose glossy black hard waves had hardened while rolling and struggling with each other under some fierce tempest. It is, however, a cone ascending gradually to the fire pit from these precipitous edges of the bowl. Under the smoke cloud of the pit lies the always active lake of fire, Ka Lua Pele, the Pit of Pele, the traditional home of the goddess Pele, now called Halemaumau, house fixed or continuing. From this volcano, Kilauea, and the crater Mokuaweweo, which lies like an island in the top of Mauna Loa, nearly 10,000 feet higher, come enormous and sometimes destructive lava flows. They are called rivers of lava, but a lava river, unlike a stream of water, flows underneath a continually cooling and hardening crumpled surface, pushing its way from under and at last leaving long tunnels. Sometimes new lava melts through the walls of these caves and pours along the path left ages before, frequently finding an outlet even under the waves of the sea. The natives say Pele has gone to the sea by the Alahuna, the hidden path. There are two kinds of lava which these rivers carry down. One, in cooling, becomes very smooth and hard. Its surface shines like black satin. Professor C.H. Hitchcock, the eminent geologist, says, the name Pahoho signifies having the aspect of satin or having a shining, smooth surface. It is quite hummocky and shows a wrinkled, ropey structure. The glossy part is real volcanic glass shining on the surface because the silica, which is used in making glass, rises to the top of the cooling lava. It is lighter than the other ingredients. This Pa-ho-ho lava is abundant in the lava fields around Mexico City. The name AA, which signifies torn up by roots, is the name given to another kind of lava. An AA flow is lava changed into bristling, ragged rocks, with innumerable fine, sharp edges cutting like fragments of broken glass. It appears very much like slag from iron furnaces, only infinitely worse to handle. These two Hawaiian names are now the accepted scientific names for these classes of lava the world over. In 1911, the first successful attempt to secure the temperature of the boiling lava in the Lake of Fire was made scientifically. Professor F.G. Parrott came from his observatory by Vesuvius, and Professor E.G.G. Shepard from the Geophysical Laboratory of the Carnegie Institution at Washington to study Kilauea, following the beginning of such observations already established by Professor Jagger of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They stretched a wire cable 1,500 feet long from wall to wall over the Lake of Fire. They ran wires through pulleys along this cable and dropped the best instruments they had with them straight down. Some of these were broken before registration could be secured. The last thermometer registered 1850 degrees Fahrenheit, remaining steadily at that point until the thermometer was withdrawn. Later it was again lowered, but, according to Professor Shepard, Pele arose in her wrath, grasped the thermometer, flung hot lava on the supporting wires, thereby weakening them, and then, with a final jerk, broke the thermometer from its supports and swallowed it. Pele seems to like ironware for diet. The record of from 1800 degrees to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit seems to be the normal heat of the Lake of Fire, sometimes, of course, rising much higher under special conditions. The scientific observers, when speaking of lava heat, usually say it is 1850 degrees Fahrenheit. 3. Volcanic activity. In a little notebook in Hilo is a record which from time to time has been studied and copied frequently by visiting scientists. The missionary mother who put down the facts therein recorded never dreamed of being scientific. She simply kept a record. In 1832, Mrs. Sarah J. Lyman came to Hilo, where her husband founded the Hilo Boys Boarding School, a school, by the way, after which the great Hampton Institute of Virginia was patterned. On October the 3rd, 1833, she was tossed around in her home in a way somewhat alarming. She opened her little notebook and wrote, 2 earthquakes, one of them heavy. She had a little curiosity to see how frequently these earthquakes disturbed her home. Thus the record went on from month to month and year to year, earthquake, motion up and down, heavy shake, stone walls down, cream shaken off the milk, 4 a.m., all the family aroused, jar and a noise like distant cannon, tremendous shock, brace ourselves to stand up, Kaimimiki. Sea shaken by an earthquake, all motions combined, earth like the sea. At one time the record ran, frequent jars, severe, so many I have ceased to count. Interspersed through this concise and interesting story of earthquakes told in a few word pictures are many references to other volcanic phenomena. Activity, great in Mokuaweoweo. Mountain clear for several days, the smoke is marked. Light, brilliant at night, snow extensive on both mountains. The year 1868 has been marked as the volcano year of Hawaiian history. Mr. F.S.S. Lyman, now living in Hilo, wrote a journal letter which was quoted in full. He writes as follows about the earthquake. March 27-31, 1868. A sudden eruption from Mauna Loa, no forewarning, a spray of red lava thrown high in the air, followed by a great stream of smoke rising up thousands of feet. In Kau we had quite a sprinkling of Pele's hair, peculiar earthquakes, first hard shakes, then a swaying motion, as if the whole island were swaying back and forth and we with it. March 31. From about 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., the shaking was incessant. Thursday, April 2nd, we experienced the most fearful of earthquakes. The earth swayed north, south, east, west, round and round, up and down, and in every imaginable direction, everything crashing around us, trees thrashing as if torn by a mighty wind, impossible to stand. We had to sit on the ground, bracing with hands and feet to keep from rolling over. Mr. H.M. Whitney, editor of the Advertiser, says that the number of shocks which occurred at Waiohinu from March 29 to April 10 was estimated at upwards of 2,000. The heaviest shock, that of April 2, destroyed every church and nearly every dwelling in the whole district. This earthquake was felt very sensibly in Honolulu. Following the earthquake came a great tidal wave at Punaluu. It rolled in over the tops of coconut trees, probably 60 feet high at least, driving all floating rubbish inland about a quarter of a mile, taking with it, when it returned to the sea, houses, men and women, and everything movable. Mr. Lyman wrote, "We could see the shore." All along the seashore, from directly below us to Punaluu, about 3 or 4 miles, the sea was boiling and foaming furiously, all red. 2 remarkable eruptions accompanied this earthquake. The lava, starting from the slope of Mauna Loa, sank into some great channel but burst forth with a heavy roar several miles farther down. The lava stream became a river of fire, flowing rapidly toward and around some farmhouses. The inmates had barely time to escape. The path by which they fled was covered with lava within 10 minutes after they passed over it. Animals and even human beings perished. The number of deaths were between 80 and 100. This eruption flowed 10 miles in 2 hours, and continued 5 days, destroying many thousands of acres of good lands. The second remarkable eruption was nearer the crater Kilauea, and has been known as the Great Mud Flow of 1868. It is in the region covered by the Pahala Plantation. Mr. Lyman writes, "In the midst of the great earthquake we saw burst out from the top of the Pali about 1.5 miles north of us what we supposed to be an immense river of molten lava, which afterward proved to be red earth, which rushed down in headlong course and across the plain below, apparently bursting from the ground and swallowing up everything in its way, trees, houses, cattle, horses, men, in an instant, as it were. It went 3 miles in not more than 3 minutes' time and then stopped. After the hard shaking had ceased, we went right over to a hill with the children and our natives, expecting every moment to be swallowed up by the lava from beneath, for it sounded as if it were surging and washing under our feet all the time. Outside of Punaluu, we saw a long black point of lava slowly pushing out to sea. An island about 400 feet high rose out of the sea at the south point. The lava river has extended the shore to this island 1 mile at least." Mrs. Lyman wrote, Jan. 30, 1875, light exceedingly brilliant. Perpendicular column of smoke over 1,000 feet high on the summit crater, spreading out at top like an expanding flower. This august glow was described by members of the Challenger expedition as a globular cloud perpetually reformed by condensation, having a brilliant orange glow at night as if a fire were raging in the distance. This display from the summit of Mauna Loa continued about 18 months. Isabella Bird Bishop, author of 6 Months in the Sandwich Islands, visited this active crater in 1874 and wrote about the crater itself. Nearly opposite us, a fountain of pure yellow fire, unlike the gory gleam of Kilauea, was throwing up its glorious incandescence. The sunset gold was not purer than the living fire. The roar of this surging lava sea was a glorious sound, the roar of an ocean at despise mingled with the hollow murmur of surf echoing in sea caves, booming on, rising and falling like the thunder music of windward Hawaii. The area below us was over 2 miles long and 1.5 miles wide, with precipitous sides and a broad second shelf about 300 feet below the one we occupied, with a fire fountain 3/4 of a mile away. On the way up the mountain there was a fearful internal throbbing and rumbling. Rocks and masses of soil were dislodged. The earth reeled, then rocked again with such violence that I felt as if the horse and myself had gone over. During these months of 1874 to 1875, there were magnificent exhibitions of clouds reflecting volcanic fires caused by the upburst of lava fountains. The summit crater of Mauna Loa is about 13,000 feet altitude. Snow has frequently covered the top of the mountain, lying in deep banks around the edge of the crater. The cold has acted quickly upon the lake of fire, congealing a large part of the surface into a hard floor of lava. Gases, steam, and smoke lift this floor and break through it with great violence, escaping from the melted lava in pillars of cloud against which the fires beneath mirror themselves in glorious displays of color. These outbursts were frequently called eruptions. The modern name is more correct. They are glows reflecting wonderful fires beneath. Mrs. Lyman mentions another eruption from the summit of Mauna Loa. 1877, Feb. 14, eruption seen on the mountain. 10 days extinct, then broke out lower down the mountain and reached the sea in a few days near Kaiawaloa, Kealakekua Bay. Dana says, the columns of illuminated steam rose with fearful speed to a height of 14,000 to 17,000 feet, and then spread out into a vast fiery cloud, looking at night as if the heavens were on fire. After this, there was an underground eruption to the sea, marked by a fissure down the mountainside, through which clouds of steam and smoke were forced. The lava at last found its place for escape under the sea. H.M. Whitney, the editor of the Hawaiian Gazette, was a witness of this submarine eruption. In the issue of Feb. 28, 1877, he wrote, as the steamer Kilauea came toward the bay, the passengers saw some canoes rowing about over boiling water. The natives reported that about 3 o'clock in the morning of Feb. 24, they had seen innumerable red, blue, and green lights dancing in the waters. Morning disclosed a new volcano in the sea. The southern shore of the bay has been known as Kei Point. The eruption appeared to be in a straight line out from this point. 3 boats from the steamer went out, cruising over the most active part of the boiling waters, appearing as if passing over rapids. Blocks of lava 2 feet across were thrown up from beneath, striking the boats and jarring them. The lava was quite soft and no harm was done. 6 stones hit the boat in 1 minute. Several hundred pieces of these stones were floating on the sea at one time. Nearly all the pieces on reaching the surface were red hot, emitting steam and gas strongly sulfurous. Several were taken into the boats, perfectly incandescent and so molten in the interior that the lava could be stirred with a stick, the water having penetrated only about an inch. When these stones cooled and became water-soaked, they sank rapidly. The specimens taken from the water were of the A'a variety and very light. Probably only the lightest came to the surface. Some of the lava consisted of Pele's hair, red-hot, yet preserving its peculiar characteristics. Mrs. Lyman has the record of a terrible tidal wave which struck Hilo Harbor in May of that same year, 1877, May 10th. A heavy tidal wave at 5 a.m. destroying 34 houses on the Waiakea side of the harbor, also the bridge, and 12 houses between Waialama and Aiko's old store. 160 people homeless, some bruised, bones broken, 5 dead. Wave was 13.5 feet above high water mark at Waiakea, swept inland 40 rods, accurate measurement. Following this, on May 31, came the record, severe shake, things thrown down. Dana says, a destructive earthquake wave was felt at the Hawaiian Islands on May 10, 1877, which rose at Hilo to a height of 36 feet. But it was of South American origin, where there were heavy earth shocks, and not of Hawaiian. One of the eruptions from Mokuawaweo tried to take possession of a riverbed, but the waters chilled one side of the lava and built it into a wall. On one side was flowing fire, and on the other the swift rapids of a river. The antagonistic elements sought the sea side by side. A native account of Kilauea in Kahahe, Hawaii, the Hawaiian flag, was a native account of eruptions on the island Hawaii. The sketch is in the quaint Hawaiian tongue and is valuable throughout, but only a few extracts from the translation can be used at present. The story as told by the Hawaiian runs as follows. In the very ancient time, Mauna Kea threw out vast Pele fires, but long ago these eruptions have been imprisoned. The earth has covered them in on all sides, and the abundant soil, large trees, and green things of many kinds are multiplying. But not so Mauna Loa and Hualalai, other mountains of this island Hawaii. Pele fires have burst forth from them even up to recent times. Mauna Loa is the greatest of all the mountains, opening doors for the Pele fires from all its sides. Kilauea and Mokuaweo are the very wonderful Pele pits, craters discharging fire from the very depths of the mountains. In the year 1822, or 1823 perhaps, there was an eruption from Kilauea pouring down into the Kau district very close to the Puna line. From the depths of Kilauea was this bursting forth. The A'a, broken lava of this eruption in its journey to the sea spread about 8 miles. In the year 1832, the pit of Kilauea was full of burning A'a. It broke into some ancient tunnel connected with Kilauea and flowed away. The place where the A'a reached the sea is not known. It is supposed to have gone into the sea underground. In the year 1840, the people of Puna and Hilo districts saw a great fire inland. They thought that the forest wilderness was burning. That day was the Sabbath. The people assembled together and looked toward the place where the fire was very great and the air was heavy with smoke. Then they saw that this was not an ordinary forest fire, but a Pele, an eruption. They could not see any AA breaking out on the mountain, and therefore were greatly afraid that it was very near and would destroy their lands. Volumes of smoke rolled, curling upward, while the strong steam burst forth with reports like the firing of cannon. On the 4th day of June, that eruption poured down into the sea. Narrow was the flow in steep places and spread out widely in others. Where it came to the sea, mighty was the stormy rage and the boiling of the sea, the steam rising in clouds to the sky. There were built up on the beach 2 hills of black sand, about 400 feet in height. Only on the side from which the wind blew could anyone come near. On the other side the smoke was very strong, offensive, and sickening like a volcano. Then there were burning ashes destroying every green thing for many miles. The lands of the people of Nanaweli were quickly made a desolate wilderness by the heat and the overflowing lava. Some animals were caught by the lava and burned to death. None of the people were destroyed. They escaped with poverty. A curious and interesting statement is made by the Hawaiian fishermen of Waikiki concerning a peculiar disturbance of the sea simultaneous with all seasons of volcanic agitation. One of the older and more intelligent fishermen says that from his boyhood he has known a pushing up and down, backward and forward, of the waters every time that Mauna Loa has shown activity in either of its great craters. Fish nets are so tossed about that it is almost impossible to retain any fish in them. Hooks are so rapidly moved by the commotion in the waters that fishing with hook and line is not very successful. The Hawaiians call the ocean at such times kai mimiki, the rushing sea. Mimiki is defined as a meeting of a returning wave with another advancing, and is sometimes used to express the confusion of advancing and returning tidal waves. Sometimes mimiki is used to denote the choppy waters which follow a storm. The inherent idea of the word seems to be quick, independent action of waves, bringing them into conflict with each other and destroying the quiet, regular motion. 4. Changes in Kilauea crater. There have been two entirely distinct modifications in Kilauea. One belongs to the centuries and the mountain which the crater has been trying to build. The other relates to the fire pit and the fire lake therein. Kilauea is a mountain a little over 4,000 feet in altitude, closely connected with Mauna Loa, which is about 13,000 feet in altitude. It has been stated that there is some connection which affects the action of two lakes of lava in the two craters. Kilauea is a great bowl sunken in a plain which seems level but which slopes decidedly toward the large mountain on the one side and the ocean on the other. Above the present fire pit rise great plateaus and a summit 500 feet above the edges of the present crater and about 1 mile east of it. This elevation shows that at one time the lake of fire had its real crater rim extending far back of the site of the Volcano Hotel and very much higher than at present, and that great floods of lava were poured out over the surrounding country at a height impossible for the new crater to attain. After these eruptions, the fire pit sank away, leaving great precipitous walls and wide cracks, out of which even now pour clouds of steam of such intense heat and such powerful sulfur fumes that animals falling in are killed instantly. There are several terraces showing how the precipices, cracks, and plateaus followed each other step by step down to the bed of Kilauea itself. There are hints of these changes in the traditions of the Hawaiians, but it is impossible to know exactly what is meant. Reverend Villian Ellis, author of Polynesian Researches, and a deputation of the American missionaries studying the opportunities for missionary labor while making a tour around Hawaii in 1823, visited Kilauea and wrote the following description of the volcano. In this report, afterward incorporated in Polynesian Researches as Volume 4, the following account is given of ancient Kilauea. We asked the natives with us to tell us what they knew of the history of this volcano. From them we learned that it had been burning from time immemorial, or to use their own words, mai ka po mai, from chaos until now, and had inundated some part of the country during the reign of every king that had governed Hawaii. In earlier ages it used to boil up, overflow its banks, and inundate the adjacent country. But for many kings' reigns past it had kept below the level of the surrounding plain, continually extending its surface and increasing its depth, and occasionally throwing up with violent explosions huge rocks and red-hot stones. These eruptions, they said, were always accompanied by dreadful earthquakes, loud claps of thunder, and vivid and quick succeeding lightning. No great explosion, they added, had taken place since the days of Kiowa, a part of whose army was destroyed by a shower of ashes and foul gases in 1790. But many places near the sea had since been overflowed, on which occasions Pele went by a road underground from her house in the crater to the shore. Concerning Pele, the natives said, Kilauea had been burning ever since the islands had emerged from night, but it was not inhabited till after the Taiaka Hinari, the sea or deluge of Hina the chief. Shortly after this flood, they say the present volcanic family came from Tahiti, meaning some foreign country, to Hawaii. When the crater was boiling up, overflowing its banks, and inundating the adjacent territory, as the natives said, it poured out lava which became solid rock. As it went westward, the character of its overflow changed, becoming explosive, hurling out cinders and ashes instead of boiling lava, so that all the land, especially toward the south and west, is covered with volcanic ash. For more than 100 years there has been no uplift of lava or ashes over the outside crater rim. During this century there has been no marked change in the great edge of the bowl, but the interior has been kaleidoscopic. The bowl is flat-bottomed with a surface creased and cracked and rough, with twisted piles of dead lava. In innumerable spots, any cool morning welcomes rising clouds of steam, and in the western part is the Lua Pele, a pit filled with living fire. This outer crater is about 3.5 miles across. 100 years ago, the floor of this crater was the scene of continual activity. Around the entire rim was a black ledge or balcony against which fountains of lava hurled their repeated drops, falling on the black ledge. Now the fire pit is but a little over 1/4 of a mile in diameter, and yet it has the same form of black ledge which had been built up in the great crater so many years before. When first visited by the missionaries, there were many hilly islands, fountain cones, and hissing blowholes. Later, the great floor began to cool and lakes appeared in different sections. In 1890, when the writer first saw the home of the fire goddess, there were 3 lakes through which eruptive gases burst with explosions like the continual rattle of artillery, and there were 2 great rivers of lava flowing across the wide black floor of the vast crater. Now there is only 1 lake of fire. Kalua Pele, the pit of Pele, is at present on a small scale what the crater of Kilauea was in its magnitude in 1823 and for many years thereafter. The brief mention of shifting fires, flowing rivers, raging lakes, deep pits, falling walls, and frozen, uneven lava surfaces must suffice to make evident the stupendous forces of nature which have terrified the Hawaiians for centuries, and have made them build up legends in and around these terrors, and have created the demand for a special fire goddess to take rank with the other gods worshipped. Foundation of the Observatory. Excerpts from the report of the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, Jan. Miksh, 1912. Published by the Society of Arts of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Boston. The Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, now in operation for 5 years from July 1, 1912, under the direction of the Department of Geology of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, is the result and culmination of a succession of investigations, constructions, appointments, and expeditions, mostly under that institution, which began in 1898 with the building of a small geodetic observatory in Boston. The work has been concerned with geodesy, astronomy, magnetism, and geology, and has been partly under the direction of officers of the Department of Civil Engineering and partly under professors of geology. The result of this activity that had the most direct bearing on the establishment of the Volcano Observatory was its influence on the trustees of the Whitney Estates, who, on July 1, 1909, gave to the Institute the sum of $25,000 as a memorial of Edward and Caroline Rogers Whitney of Boston for the conduct of research or teaching in geophysics to include investigations in seismology, conducted with a view to the protection of human life and property, present preference being that some investigations in geophysics be undertaken in Hawaii. The purpose of the science of geophysics is to investigate all the physical and chemical processes going on in the Earth. Recent disasters such as Messina and San Francisco have shown how defective, for humane and practical purposes, our knowledge of these processes is. Before the intervention of the Whitney trustees, it had been the desire of the Institute to secure a volcanic site in order to observe the local activities of a particular volcano, as well as the waves which pass through the earth from distant earthquakes. Professor Jagger had, for some time past, been investigating and considering this subject. After mature deliberation, Professor Jagger concluded that Kilauea affords the best point for the location of the proposed observatory among those places in the world which have come to his knowledge for the following reasons. 1. At other volcanoes, the eruptions are more explosive, and an observatory located close enough to the center of activity is in some danger. Kilauea, while displaying great and varied activity, is relatively safe. 2. Other volcanoes are more or less connected in chains, making many stations necessary in order to determine the relations of the different craters to each other. Kilauea and Mauna Loa form an isolated center of activity, over 2,000 miles from the nearest active vent, so that the phenomena of these two vents can be recorded without complications occasioned by other nearby centers. 3. Kilauea is very accessible. The nearby harbor at Hilo is only 31 miles distant. It may be reached by railroad in a good driveway, and Honolulu, a center of traffic and science, is easily reached in a day. 4. The Central Pacific position is unique and is of advantage for recording distant earthquakes through the uninterrupted seafloor which lies between Hawaii and many earthquake places such as South America, Mexico, and Japan. For expeditions in case of disaster or otherwise, a relatively short route is assured, with abundant means of transportation to Pacific and East Indian ports. For the study of the deep-sea floor, Hawaii is obviously favorable. 5. The climate is uniform and the air clear for astronomical work. 6. There are frequent small earthquakes which are of great interest for technical reasons. 7. The remarkable distribution of both hot and cold underground waters in Hawaii needs careful study, and this has an important bearing on agriculture as well as upon science. The territory is American, and these volcanoes are famous in the history of science for their remarkably liquid lavas and nearly continuous activity. Professor Jagger consequently advised those interested: 1. To erect buildings on the brink of the volcano of Kilauea, in which to house the instruments, library, and offices for working up and tabulating the statistics, records, and information obtained. 2. To set apart a room for a local museum to exhibit to visitors instruments, plans, diagrams, maps, and photographs. This will be of value and exciting interest, with a view to securing an endowment. 3. To welcome advanced students from either the Institute or other institutions for special work in the laboratory. 4. To erect subordinate instrument stations with self-recording instruments and to employ voluntary observers at various points hereafter to be determined. It is hoped that eventually some work will be done by the staff of the observatory in the study of tides, soundings, earthquake waves, and the movements of the coastline of the island. 5. To send expeditions to other volcanic and earthquake belts for comparative studies. 6. To carry on research, as may seem expedient, in terrestrial gravitation, magnetism, and variation of latitude. 7. To make a geological survey of the island of Hawaii. It is hoped that this will lead to a thorough survey of the whole territory by the United States Geological Survey. He added that the main object of all the work should be humanitarian, earthquake prediction, and methods of protecting life and property on the basis of sound scientific achievement. Results obtained in connection with all subjects of investigation should be promptly published in the form of bulletins and memoirs. In pursuit of these ideas, Professor Jagger proceeded to enlist support from the Chamber of Commerce and the leading citizens of Honolulu. A generous response came from a number of organizations, including the Bishop Museum and individuals. The total amount promised was $3,450 per year for a period of 5 years. This sum was not sufficient to do the work satisfactorily, and the development of the plan was halted in consequence. The subscription of the Bishop Museum was made upon the condition that the Institute shall furnish the trustees without expense, except for transportation, samples of all museum specimens collected, properly described, also copies of all published maps, surveys, and literature made by the Institute in connection with Hawaiian interests. Seattle. In the course of a journey to Japan, Mr. Jagger visited the volcano Kilauea in Hawaii twice, in March and in July 1909. Professor Daly spent the summer in the Hawaiian Islands, making careful study of Kilauea, and the result of his work has since been published in Volume 47, No. 3, of the Proceedings of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences under the title The Nature of Volcanic Action. Both of these expeditions were at private expense. In 1910, the first available income of the Whitney Fund was used in the construction of special resistance thermometers made by Leeds and Northrop at Baltimore under the direction of Doctors A.L.L. Day and E.S. Shepard of the Geophysical Laboratory of the Carnegie Institution of Washington. Dr. Day, director of this laboratory, in correspondence with Professors Daly and Jagger during the winter of 1909-10, agreed to send Dr. Day $9,000 Shepard to Kilauea and provide traveling expenses if the Institute of Technology would provide instruments and living expenses during a stay at the volcano house devoted to measurement of the temperature of liquid lava. Dr. Shepard is a chemist and a specialist in pyrometric work. With the aid of Institute engineers, a cableway was designed for spanning the inner pit of Halemaumau, wherewith by a wire trolley system pyrometric apparatus might be lowered into the lava. During 1909 and 1910, 3 seismographs, in addition to the Bosch Omori instruments already obtained with Whitney funds, were constructed for the Institute in Tokyo under Dr. Omori's direction and shipped to Honolulu. For 2 years in succession, 1910 and 1911, it was impossible for any of the professors of geology at the Institute to go to Hawaii, so arrangements were made with Mr. F.A.A. Parrott of Springfield, Mass., and Naples, Italy, to take Professor Jagger's place in an expedition to Kilauea for the measurement of temperatures as agreed with the Carnegie Geophysical Laboratory. The sum of $2,100 from the Whitney and other geological research funds of the Institute was expended on this expedition. The Institute is indebted to the Carnegie Geophysical Laboratory for cooperation and for the thermo-element which was used in the final test, and to the Volcanic Research Society of Springfield, Mass., for the loan of the services of Mr. Parrott, his salary being continued by that society during his Hawaiian journey. Mr. Parrott built a wooden camp on the edge of the pit Halemaumau, which he called the Technology Station, and where he lived. It will appear from the foregoing that the work bearing on a proposed volcano observatory in Hawaii up to 1912 was instituted and carried forward by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. That institution was materially aided in the conduct of this work by voluntary subscription among citizens of Honolulu. Some $6,100, in addition to salaries, was spent by the Institute of Technology for its officers for work in Hawaii prior to 1912, and after Mr. Parrott's departure in November 1911, an appropriation of $1,700 for Professor Jagger's work in Hawaii in the winter of 1912 was made from technology funds. The subscription fund provided for in Honolulu in 1909 was revived on October 5, 1911, at a luncheon at the University Club, given for the organization of a Hawaiian Volcano Research Association. The net result of this meeting was to establish an association in Honolulu for the subscription of money to volcano research. The committee representative of this association determined to name the organization Hawaiian Volcano Research Association. Funds for the running expense of an observatory on Hawaii to the amount of $5,000 annually for 5 years from January 1, 1912, exclusive of the funds furnished by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, were subscribed, the full amount in the event of failure on the part of individual subscribers being guaranteed by Mr. Clarence H. Guise. Cook, treasurer, through the generosity of Mr. Cook and his associates of the estate of CML. Cook, Ltd. The institute was prepared to cooperate with the Hawaiian Volcano Research Association by becoming its largest subscriber for the 5 years through the income of the Whitney Fund and the current payment to its seismological fund. On January 19, a subscription was started in the town of Hilo to provide funds wherewith to build a laboratory near the Volcano House for the use of the representative of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology engaged in volcanic research. This proposal met a most hearty response, and within a few days, 5785 was subscribed. The land for the observatory, a tract of about 3 acres, was obtained on a sublease for 15 years to October 1, 1927, from the Volcano House Company with the consent of the trustees of the Bishop Estate, the owners of the land. This tract is on the edge of the cliff directly opposite the grounds of the Volcano House on the south side of the Punakau Road. The observatory is built of Oregon pine and is equipped with 2 laboratories, the director's room, photographic darkroom, and storeroom on the main floor. A veranda extending along 2 sides commands extensive views of the 3 volcanoes, Kilauea, Mauna Loa, and Mauna Kea. In front there is a concrete post for geodetic and photographic experiments. The furniture includes large cases of drawers for storage of specimens, maps, or photographs, and there are work and drafting tables. The Whitney Laboratory of Seismology, 18 feet square, is a basement room of concrete floored on the solid ledge of basalt. This is the rock of the uppermost layer of the cliff which here borders the greater crater of Kilauea. The cellar was dug through 50 feet of ash and pumice, which make the surface soil. The piers for seismographs were designed for a set of instruments built in Tokyo in 1910 under the direction of Professor Omori and purchased with the income of the Whitney Fund. On January 24, 1912, Mr. F. B. Dodge of Honolulu arrived at the volcano to become assistant to the director, and during the ensuing weeks, arrangements were completed and trigonometric stations installed whereby a daily survey of the active lava pool could be made. The territorial government loaned the services of a part of the prison gang which does the road work for the territory of Hawaii, to clear the land, dig the cellar, and build the roadway of the observatory. An additional hut constructed wholly without iron for possible magnetic work was built on the verge of Halemauau for direct instrumental observations of the lava, under shelter. The fundamental idea expressed at the time of the formation of the Hawaiian Volcano Research Association was to the effect that the crater observations should be continuous and permanent. From the point of view of the educator, however, there is another equally vital work to be accomplished by such an experiment station as the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, namely, provision for scientific hospitality. The study of geophysics and geochemistry in the field is so extensive and inclusive a department of science that no resident staff could hope to cover the whole field without large expense and a very large working force. Moreover, the spirit of generous exchange of opportunity and of ideas in science, with a liberal welcome to serious students of all schools, is modern and novel and should promote the most rapid progress. Accordingly, it is proposed in the Hawaiian Observatory to combine 2 objects, record of facts of volcanology and seismology by the permanent staff, and surveys in the field of special topics by expert specialists invited to come from other institutions.